I finally got around to start to put some videos up, and I realized things go so fast, and there's so much happening nowadays. I gotta have focus. And so I figured that when I start reading articles and I react to them and I start talking back at the internet and I start replying to the article I'm reading, that's when I know I got a good topic. Just like when you talk back to the TV, which I do all the time, or talk back to YouTube, which I do all the time. In fact, you'd think I was psychotic if you heard me. Well, that's what I'm doing. I do this also with articles. I talk back to them. So let me tell you what I've been reacting to, or what I've been talking back to. It's an article on Grub Street, and the headline is, "Can anyone really solve New York City's indoor dining problem?" It actually came from One Great Story, which is a New York newsletter, but it's just talking about the difficulty that New York restaurants, dining and drinking establishments are having with the COVID restrictions, the distancing. They're restricted from eating indoors. This is dated, by the way, September 2, just a few days ago. And it quotes one person, DeRossi, I think his name is, who owns a number of establishments. And he says one of his places has space for 40 outdoor seats, which is roughly what it had inside. But the space next door, which is another restaurant, he's got one restaurant that's a tapas place, another place next door that's a vegetable bar, or actually a Filipino restaurant. So he says my space next door is blocked by a fire hydrant. I'm literally only gonna get 8 seats, he says. We couldn't even do enough sales to pay the staff because of the fire hydrant. And then the article goes on to say that New York's expanded outdoor dining for the 10,000 restaurants that are currently participating in the program. New York's expanded outdoor dining, now it's a program, so I wonder if that means they have to pay extra fees for extra outdoor seating. I don't know. It's a program, so that presumably that engages some kind of enhanced city permitting process, which I would think probably has more fees attached to it. But New York's expanded outdoor dining is perhaps not the solution to combating the economic downturn that arrived after sitting barefaced near other people became a dangerous activity. Let me interrupt right there to say, sitting barefoot next to other people is not a dangerous activity. It's not dangerous. They haven't cited any kind of science. The city, nor any other city, by the way, that has done this, has cited any scientific evidence that people increased sicknesses, let alone severe sicknesses, let alone hospitalizations, deaths have occurred because of restaurants and drinking establishments. Unless you want to talk about sexually transmitted diseases after people drink too much and, go home with people that they don't know too well. But that's not COVID-19. They don't talk about evidence. They don't talk about the likelihood of catching something from just sitting across a table from somebody for a half hour or an hour or two. They don't talk about the actual probabilities of catching enough, because you have to have an infectious dose of a virus. Even if someone does talk at you and you catch some vapor, which, by the way, we do every time we talk to everybody. Because you know what? We breathe vapor out of our lungs. Just like we breathe CO2, every breath you take is water vapor. And sometimes that inevitably contains viruses or bacteria, because guess what? We are virus and bacteria ecosystems. But that's another story. But look up microbiome. Look up the word microbiome. Look up the word virome, V-I-R-O-M-E, and see that the human body is like a planet full, teeming with microbiological life. That's not you. We're full of bacteria, viruses, fungi, yeast, all the time, and guess what? We're always exchanging them. Guess what? You're shedding billions of dead skin cells per day. Guess what those contain? Those all contain bacteria and viruses. The bacteria have their own viruses inside them. This is what they're not telling you. And this is what, if you didn't take biology, good biology courses, or if you didn't pay attention in biology in college, in high school, a lot of us didn't, this is what you don't know, and this is your ignorance is what they're playing on. This whole game runs on your lack of knowledge about how biology works. Microbes are biology. Human life is teeming with microbes, germs, all the time. From the time you were born, you were covered in germs. Yes, that's the dirty, nasty, ugly truth. Guess what, though? Most of these germs aren't dirty. They're not nasty. They don't cause disease. Most of them are harmless, and in fact, many are helpful. In fact, we cannot survive without certain of these microbes in our system, particularly in our guts. The microbes that cover our skin actually block the pathogenic bad ones that could cause disease and infections. So most of them are doing us a favor. This is one thing they also don't tell you. These so-called health experts who talk at you from the TV, Falsey, what's his name? This is what he doesn't tell you. The vast majority of microbes are benign, as are the vast majority of ones that we spread when we touch each other, when we talk to each other, even when we sneeze in each other's vicinity, when we, inadvertently spit on each other, while we're talking. Sometimes it happens, or when we kiss each other, or when we, whatever. The vast majority of the microbes that we share, and we are sharing them all the time, and that's unavoidable. It's a fact of life. The only way you can stop it is if you exit life by dying. Well then, the microbes will decompose you, but that's just a fact of life. And they'd like you to be a germaphobe. They'd like you to think that you can make your life sterile, you can avoid all interaction with a germ. Like I said, you can't. So these are some of the things that people need to realize. And if you're one of those people who didn't always pay attention in school, in biology, or you just didn't have a good biology class, now's your chance. It's imperative upon you to now do some research. Look into the microbiome. Look up the virome. Look up probiotics. Look up commensal bacteria and viruses and microbes and what they do for us. And this is the first step to breaking the hold of this kind of illusory fear that they have hammered into our heads through our lack of knowledge. But once you get the knowledge, you won't lose it, but you will lose that fear. But to go back to the restaurant topic for just a second, number one, you have to get educated about how biology works. Number two, you have to get educated about this so-called COVID-19 phenomenon and the real risk or lack thereof. There isn't any. We're finding out now that a teeny tiny fraction of the deaths that have been attributed to it actually are from it. But really what it boils down to is that people own their bodies. You own your health. You own the risk that you take, and people need to take sole ownership and responsibility of their own lives, their own health, an own risk that they take. You take a risk every time you step out your door. Even before you step out of your door, you take a risk with every breath you take. And the older you get, the higher your chance of dying today from something. And every time you step out of the house, practically, Every time you cross a street, you take a risk. Every time you every time you get behind the wheel of a car, you take a risk. Every time you get in a car driven by someone else, you take a risk. And in fact, the risk of you dying is probably higher than the risk of you ever dying of this stupid virus. So people have to take their own lives and say, hey, you know, I'm going to calculate my own risk today. I don't need you telling me that how safe or unsafe I'm going to be today. This is my life. I'm responsible for it. I'm responsible in me alone for the risk that I take upon myself. And you know, businesses have to be the same way. You have to finally say enough of this bullshit. Between me and my paying customers who come here voluntarily, I don't force them to come here, we're going to work it out. We're going to decide together, and our employees too, we're going to decide together what we're going to do today and how much risk is acceptable to us to enjoy, to number one, make a living, or number two, enjoy this food or drink and enjoy a good time with our friends and families at an eating or drinking establishment. We're going to make that decision because you know what? It's ours to make. Get the fuck out of our faces. That's my message for today. Decide that your life is your life. It doesn't belong to some mayors, governors, or some president. It doesn't belong to some legislature. It doesn't belong to police. It doesn't belong to other people. It doesn't belong to screaming Karens who want to hassle you about COVID this and COVID that. It doesn't belong to some medical establishment. It doesn't belong to Anthony Fauci and a bunch of healthocrats who lie to you every day. It belongs to you. And I want to say, business owners, your business belongs to you. It does not belong to a city. It does not belong to a government. It belongs to you. Who put the work in? You. Who got the training? You. Who put in your blood, sweat, and tears? You. Who took out the loans? You. Who pays back the loans? You. It's time for people to say, my life is my own, my business is my own, my property is my own, my life's work is my own, my savings are my own. Step the fuck back, because this is our life and we got this.